My parents came to visit us. Dad pastored a church in Houston. My mother was in the last stages of cancer, and he thought bringing her here might cheer her up seeing us. And so they came, and we all piled into my van on a Monday morning, and we went to, we were going to go to Charlestown Landing. We'd never seen it. Honestly, I still haven't.
I was sitting in the back row with Jason and Jessica, and we were on the highway, and I had walked up the aisle to ask my dad a question. And so I was hanging on to the headrest of the passenger seat in this little minivan, and all of a sudden Dad slammed on the brakes. And so I kind of grabbed hold of my grandmother, grabbed a hold of me. And I can remember just looking up into the rearview mirror and seeing Dad's eyes from the driver's seat, and saw that he was looking up, and he just stared at the rearview mirror and he said, "Oh my God."
The truck hit us, and then we began to move and roll, and ultimately the truck hit, I think, 4 or 5 cars, total 2 or 3 of them.
Just looking back through some of these mementos from our car accident, and the keys to the car, which I have no idea why we kept, but somehow we managed to have a set of keys left after that. We went back and had these pictures developed, and it was truly a miracle when you look at the damage that was done to the vehicle.
We came to on our side, and I can only describe the interior of the van at that moment as pandemonium. I struggled to get out of the seat. The van's on its side. And I went back just calling everybody's name out, who's here, and somebody said Jessica is hurt real bad. I took her, and she wasn't breathing, and her eyes were glazed, and she was just a bloody mess. And in that moment, I reconciled the fact in my mind that she was gone. And by that time, other cars had stopped, and there were guys on top of the van trying to open the doors, and I handed her out almost. It was almost as an act of, I don't know if I want to call it worship, or I don't know what it was. I gave her out as if I was giving her to God, because I thought she was gone. And fortunately, there were some nurses who were making the shift change at MUSC at just that time, and about 3 cars back, and they immediately began to do CPR and work on her. And the best sound of that day was hearing her scream when she finally began to breathe. I crawled out of the van because I couldn't find Jason. And I got out and I went around to the back where the semi-truck had hit. And he was suspended between the headrests on the van. The whole back of the van was torn off, and all that was left basically was a seat, and his head was suspended between the 2 headrests. And so myself and another guy who was there helping, we pulled it apart, and I grabbed him in my arms, and he was lifeless and very bloody, and I laid him down on the pavement there next to Jessica.
Somebody pulled me out of the car and took me out onto the highway, and my dad was out there, and I noticed Jason, my brother, my older brother, was laying on the highway, completely lifeless. And so I asked my dad, "What's wrong with Jason?" And I distinctly remember him saying, "Jason's gone. We need to focus on the people we can help."
And by that time, they were getting other people out of the van one at a time. They eventually had to cut the top off to get my mother out and my father, who had broken his back. And it was just surreal. This doesn't happen to you. And I can remember standing on about the 8th or 9th floor, wherever the children's wing was at that point at Medical University, with Debbie with my arm around her, looking out, and we're crying, and we don't know anybody.
we don't know anybody here. What are we doing here after this happened? And now 20 years later, it's just so amazing, the journey that began then looked like it was going to be a really difficult journey.
They stabilized the kids. They told me that Jessica was really going to be okay. She amazingly obviously had a major concussion, and she had facial cuts and a lot of stitches, but they said she's going to be okay. And Jason, they said, we think ultimately he'll be okay. They said it's a severe head injury and he's unconscious, and he probably will be for a while, but we're hopeful.
It was still hard to see him not communicating and not playing and not being his normal self, and that was a process that took probably a couple of weeks till we really saw the real Jason. And that first time he smiled at us and said something that made sense was like, it's him, he's back, you know. And then it was still a process over several weeks till we got all of Jason back, but we did get him all back.
Looking back on the accident, I think in some ways it really strengthened my faith, because I watched my dad, who had told us very clearly that God had called us to move to Charleston, and God had given him a dream to start a church. And so here we were in this foreign city to us, didn't know anybody, and this terrible accident happens to our family. But at the same time, seeing him and my mom unwavering in their confidence that God had called us to be here. And in spite of the fact that all of us wanted to go home, we wanted to go back where it was comfortable, I wanted to be with my friends, but he knew that God had called us to be here for a bigger purpose than ourselves.
The elders, when we left Freeport, Illinois, had gathered around and prayed for us that God would knit us into the hearts of the community in Charleston, knowing we didn't know anybody. I didn't know he'd do it like that.